The International Space Station is nearing the end of its operational life. And when that moment arrives, it won't just affect the United States. Russia will feel the impact as well, since its space program has been a major part of the ISS since day one. But Russia has no intention of simply disappearing from low Earth orbit. Instead, they're already developing a brand new space station to maintain a strong presence after the ISS retires. While China's station focuses on sleek, modern efficiency, the Russian concept is filled with ambitious, even unconventional ideas that are fascinating to watch come together. The story of Russia's next big step really kicked off in April 2021. That's when Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, announced it was considering leaving the International Space Station program after 2024. Their main concern centered on the aging condition of the ISS's Russian-built modules. Then, on July 26, 2022, it became official. Roscosmos confirmed it would withdraw from the ISS partnership after 2024 and instead focus on constructing its own station, the Russian Orbital Space Station, better known as ROSS. Fast forward to December 2024, and Roscosmos head Yuri Borisov shared additional details. Crewed missions to Ross are expected to begin in 2028, aligning with the ISS winding down its operations in coordination with NASA. So, what exactly will ROSS look like? Ross originally began as a reimagining of an older proposal called OPSEK, the Orbital Piloted Assembly and Experiment Complex. But over time, it evolved into something completely new, a standalone station built from scratch without reusing any hardware from the ISS's Russian segment. One of the biggest differences will be its orbit. Instead of following the ISS's trajectory, ROSS will operate in a sun-synchronous orbit about 400 kilometers above Earth. This unique path allows the station to scan the entire planet, including remote regions like the Arctic. That means Russia will gain far more frequent coverage of its own territory. A sun-synchronous orbit also makes travel to the station easier than docking with the ISS, opening opportunities for scientific, medical, and physiological research that was previously limited. In terms of structure, Ross will follow a modular design, allowing it to expand gradually. The first construction phase will focus on 4 major modules. At the center will be NEM-1, the Science and Power Module. Originally developed for the ISS and meant to house advanced laboratory equipment along with large solar arrays, it underwent a significant redesign after Roscosmos shifted its focus to Ross. That redesign took roughly 18 to 24 months. Now NEM-1 is scheduled to launch in 2027 on an Angara A5 rocket from the Vostochny Cosmodrome. A second core module, similar to NEM-1, is expected sometime in or after 2028. Supporting them will be a node module and a gateway module for connections and station access. Once the initial modules are in place, the second phase begins. This stage will add specialized modules for logistics, production, and servicing spacecraft. There is also discussion about including a commercial module capable of housing up to 4 space tourists, signaling that Roscosmos hopes to tap into the space tourism market in the near future. Externally, the station is expected to feature numerous robotic systems to assist with maintenance and assembly, reducing the need for risky spacewalks. In total, the completed station could include up to 7 modules, with full construction potentially finishing around 2035. But what really separates Ross from past stations is its ambition. One of its goals is to manage a small fleet of satellites launched directly from the station to perform various tasks nearby. This would be a first for any space station and could dramatically expand Russia's capabilities in low Earth orbit. Artificial intelligence is also part of the long-term plan. Vladimir P. Kozhevnikov, the station's chief designer, mentioned in July 2024 that AI is advancing quickly. "We will use its support," he said, "but ultimately we will rely on our own brains." What that means in practice is still unclear, but it hints at a future where AI systems may assist with station operations or even design. Ross is expected to operate autonomously with the ability to be controlled remotely from Earth. This reduces the need for a full-time crew, allowing the station to run mostly in automatic mode. Cosmonauts will visit periodically to install equipment, conduct experiments, and perform inspections and repairs. Roscosmos says this approach is not only cost-effective, but also safer since it reduces long-term radiation exposure for crews. However, even this new station faces significant challenges. The biggest issue is that Ross currently feels more like an ambitious wish list than a fully matured engineering project. A lack of detailed technical planning and thin financial support are major obstacles, and much of that stems from the ongoing war in Ukraine. The conflict has strained nearly every sector of Russia's economy, from budgets and manufacturing to its workforce. Roscosmos is struggling to sustain the nation's human spaceflight program while also dealing with shortages of skilled labor, modern technology, and funding. Realistically, the most optimistic scenario would see Russia launch a small station, essentially a single core module with a few docking ports, sometime in the early 2030s. That would closely resemble the old Soviet Salyut 6 or Salyut 7 stations from the late 1970s and 1980s, but the more likely scenario is that Russia may experience a significant gap in its human spaceflight program after the ISS is retired. Right now, the only major orbital module actively under construction in Russia is the Science and Power module. Originally intended as the final addition to the Russian segment of the ISS, it was also the first Russian module not based on a Soviet-era design. After years of delays, that plan was scrapped, and NEM became the first planned element of Ross. The problem is that the module still needs extensive redesign work. At the moment, it doesn't even have a bathroom. Other proposed modules for ROSS, including a base module and additional specialized modules, remain in early concept phases. Their designs and manufacturing timelines are unclear. Then there's the cost. The official estimate puts the entire Ross project at 69 billion rubles, but that figure is almost certainly far too low. For comparison, NASA is spending $935 million on a single module for its upcoming Gateway lunar station, and that's based on proven technology. China's Tiangong station has cost more than $8 billion. Realistically, Ross could run hundreds of billions of rubles over the initial budget estimate. This poses a major problem when Russia's total civilian space budget for 2024 is just 138 billion rubles, and that budget must also support ISS operations and other science missions. On top of that, Roscosmos faces productivity challenges. Despite having around 180,000 employees, average output is low, just 2.3 million rubles, or about $27,000 per worker annually. That's barely enough to maintain basic operations, let alone develop a next-generation space station. If Russia manages to complete and launch even just the NEM module by the early 2030s, it would already count as a major achievement. All things considered, Ross is intended to anchor Russia's long-term space ambitions, keeping cosmonauts in orbit and maintaining the nation's presence in space exploration. But the road forward will be difficult given the current geopolitical and economic climate. It will be fascinating to see how much of Ross becomes reality by, say, 2038, and how much is reshaped by global instability, from the war in Ukraine to conflicts in Gaza, climate pressures, migration challenges, and Europe's economic struggles. Right now, aside from the aging ISS and Russia's still paper ROSS station, China remains the only nation with a fully operational space station. Once the International Space Station, a massive collaboration among NASA, United States, Roscosmos, Russia, JAXA, Japan, ESA, Europe, and CSA, Canada, reaches the end of its life, China will become the sole country with its own orbital outpost. But Russia and China aren't the only players gearing up for the post-ISS era. India is also stepping forward. India's Union Minister for Space, Jitendra Singh, recently told Parliament that the nation aims to launch its first space station by 2030, right around the time the ISS is expected to retire. Kay Sivan, former head of ISRO, shared early concept details. The proposed station could weigh up to 20 tons and orbit about 400 kilometers above Earth, with astronauts staying for 15 to 20 days per mission. ISRO plans to launch it roughly 5 to 7 years after India's first crewed flight, Gaganyaan. And of course, the United States isn't stepping back as the ISS approaches retirement. NASA is actively pursuing new strategies to maintain an American presence in low Earth orbit. For more than 2 decades, the ISS has served not just as a space laboratory, but as a powerful symbol of continuous human presence 250 miles, 402 kilometers above Earth. In December 2021, NASA awarded funding to 3 companies to help develop privately owned, commercially operated space stations in low Earth orbit. This approach builds on NASA's successful partnerships with SpaceX and Boeing, which now handle crew and cargo transport using Dragon and Starliner. Encouraged by that success, NASA has committed over $400 million to accelerate the creation of commercial stations that can take over once the ISS retires. By September 2025, NASA issued a draft announcement for the next phase of partnerships. Selected companies will receive funding to support design reviews and demonstrate that their stations can sustain a crew of 4 for at least 30 days. The document doesn't require stations to support longer missions, but it lists stretch goals like hosting extended stays and eventually providing full end-to-end commercial station services. NASA will wait to certify these commercial stations and purchase services until Phase 3 of the program, expected to be elaborated in early December. That phase will involve competitive contracts, meaning companies that missed earlier funding rounds will still have a chance to bid. The goal is to certify these stations to NASA's strict safety standards so the agency can eventually buy tickets to orbit, purchasing research missions much like it already buys transport services. Which companies succeed and how fast remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. The post-ISS world won't belong to just one nation. For decades, the ISS has symbolized global cooperation in space, but it has also been a central stage for NASA. Now, with China, Russia, and India each developing their own platforms, we're entering a brand new chapter, one where low Earth orbit becomes increasingly crowded and the politics up there begin to mirror the politics down here. One thing is for sure, the future of space is about to get a whole lot more interesting.